Good morning, good day, good night. Welcome, everyone. Happy to have you back. Today we will be here with JD from RBL. Shortly, he will introduce himself. First, I will dive into a couple of news items. So from FLAIR proposal FIP10 has been accepted, which is aiming at adding incentive structures to participating protocols. And you can read more about that on proposals.flair.network. And then, as some of you might have noticed, Sceptre started buy-in staking during the snapshot period. That has been live now for a couple of, I guess, like 1.5 weeks. The 4.4% fee goes into the pool when we get the FLAIR drop, all of it. So no worries there. And it has been used until now. We've collected, anyone can see that who can read a smart contract. So we've collected 366,000 FLAIR in fees, and a quick calculation or rough calculation shows that means that it's about 7.7 million FLAIR that people have still staked during that period. So clearly it's a wanted feature, and we are happy to have been able to provide it. All right, JD.
Hey.
Welcome, man.
Thank you. It's surprising that you guys have managed to avoid having me on for this long.
But it wasn't easy, but
I finally caught you, and here we are.
Halloween, so I thought like I'm gonna get the tricks around.
Yeah, no. I can be the Halloween mascot.
So for those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So in every operation, in every partnership, they say there's beauty in brains. I'm surely not brains in RBL, and I don't know about beauty. But somehow I managed to fall into a pretty interesting partnership with some friends and now business partners, of course. Many years ago, we started investing and advising projects and so on, created Rome Blockchain Labs, which then spun out Benki and Moonwell and Sceptre, Kinetic Markets, and many other things that we've done in the past, Rome Terminal, Velux, a few other things. Anyways, we believe in the kind of innovative opportunities that blockchain presents, and not necessarily that blockchain is going to absolutely replace all other technologies, but rather make things that we know and love and that have worked in the past better and more secure and more transparent. And so we set out to do that and to bring opportunity to as many people as we can. And so here we are.
All right. Yeah, you have been in blockchain for quite some time. Definitely longer than I have.
We both have
better. The hair is still gone. The hair is still gone.
We both have the same haircut. It doesn't take long.
Definitely. So are there any projects that you're working on that you dare to say something about? Because you're probably working on something.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing some really cool stuff at Benki in the next little bit. Some of it was announced in Buenos Aires this last week. Just some upgrades and some other things to enable proliferation of L1s and different things. So I'm pretty excited about some of that stuff. Rome Blockchain Labs is working more so one of our partners than myself, but on a really cool trade finance platform that I think is really going to change the way that Web 2 and traditional businesses start to interact with blockchain. And it really does take something that exists in a fairly ugly and sticky way in traditional finance currently, admittedly, by everybody that's involved. And it makes it a lot cleaner, a lot more transparent, a lot more secure. It's really exciting. So it's a really cool tech. We have procured a really fun domain for the product, trad.fi, which is really cool. So now my email is well, actually, I'm maybe not going to say that publicly, but anyways, tier80.fi. So pretty cool project. We've got a few other things we're working on, but focusing really of late on bringing more attention and interest to Flare and trying to figure out how we can support the growth and evolution of Flare as a blockchain through a couple of products. One, obviously, Sceptre, which Lex has championed exceptionally well, and we're always thinking about new and different things we can do there. And of course, Christine and Lindsay and Jake and the team at Kinetic are doing an incredible job. And it's my job to just try to find ways to bring bigger opportunity, and every now and then a smart idea. Doesn't happen often.
Accidents do happen, right? So
every now and then we stumble into one. It's kind of like a broken clock.
Yeah. All right. So let's maybe dive into that a little bit deeper into Flare. So you've been around blockchain for a while. What is it about Flare that makes you hopeful?
Yeah, I mean, so if you've been in the space for a minute, there's kind of, in my opinion, there's two paradigms. There's one that is all about kind of hype and narrative and kind of the flavor of, I don't want to even say the flavor of the month, the flavor of the moment. It doesn't even last a month often in crypto. And I've called it a circus for years. The liquidity mining circus, the farming circus, the poop coin circus, which is kind of the more recent one. And that's great. And that's been giving, kind of this revenue opportunity for the space and this value accrual opportunity that has helped to finance the other kind of paradigm that has existed. And that really is, the people building very ambitious, very novel technology that really will impact the way we do things going forward. And so with that in mind, Flare is not the former, but rather the latter. Flare is not, a flavor of the minute or meme or whatever. Flare, and I've known Hugo for quite some time, since Flare was just a twinkle in his eye. And I mean, he's one of the smartest guys that I know, and he's a very principled person. And I mean, not to say that there's not similar personalities, leading different blockchains. Of course, most of them are pretty smart and relatively principled. But Hugo just has some very strong commitments to certain ideologies. And I think it's what the space is built on by way of decentralization and ultimate transparency, and so on. But he's got this grand vision of creating data infrastructure that we can make things in daily life, in crypto, in blockchain, a lot more performant, a lot simpler, to the extent that people may not even know that it's a blockchain powering it, and very easy to build on. So I think in the short term, we see a lot of these kind of micro campaigns and micro developments and deployments, which are exciting. And of course, we need them to kind of keep things going. But why Flare? They have a very ambitious vision that I think is novel. And, if I had to bet, often you're betting on a jockey. If I had to bet, I think betting on Hugo is a safe bet. Not financial advice, no pun intended. Yeah, I'm definitely.
We don't do no betting here.
That's
we just work in blockchain. But
we just build technology. That's it. But yeah, it's very exciting. I think there's some interesting relationships with other chains and other assets that Flare has nurtured, which is just the tip of the iceberg, I think, of where they're focused. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
All right. Looking at where Flare is now, of course, like I ask myself that question every day, like how can I help Sceptre become more useful to Flare? What is your vision on liquid staking and Sceptre in Flare and such?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been building liquid staking for a long time. I think this is going on almost 4 years of building and maintaining liquid staking via Benki and other ecosystems. And I've always been a big proponent of liquid staking for obvious reasons. The same way that liquid staking ETH became so prevalent via Lido, most other proof of stake ecosystems, until you have liquid staking, you have only one option. You can use those assets to secure the ecosystem and to lead to greater decentralization and economic security, or you can not do that and use those assets in DeFi and in other activities and so on and so forth. And that was a decision that people had to make. Were they going to tie up their assets for one function, or were they going to keep them available for another? Liquid staking, of course, allows you to have your cake and eat it too, where you can support the decentralization and growth of the ecosystem, while at the same time free up some of the equity that's locked up in those assets to be able to use it for other activities in DeFi, or however you might want to look at that. I mean, some people are using it very simply as collateral to buy real world assets. You want to finance a car at 2 or 3% cost of borrowing. It's a lot cheaper to do it using your sFLR as collateral than it might be to go to the bank and pay 11, 12, 13% in the current interest rate environments. That's one very basic example, but there's many examples. I think liquid staking does many things, but it's worth noting that liquid staking does introduce, and you're going to hate me for saying this probably, but liquid staking does introduce additional risk vectors. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, I mean, when we were working on building our liquid staking infrastructure, which is, we're very proud to say, which our V1 is what Lido is building V2. So obviously, we were onto a few things and had some opportunities to build in a way that, that has proven to be functional and useful and exciting. But we spent a lot of time working with security experts and layer one blockchains and, a lot of people trying to figure out how can we, to the best of our ability, minimize all of those, additional risks that you take with, secondary smart contracts. And there's, some automated operations that happen in there. How can we kind of create airlocks, so to speak, from manipulation or exploit? And nothing's perfect, of course, but we're very confident in our approach. And so, but it's worth noting, I mean, liquid staking relative to holding the network asset is, of course, a slight layer of additional risk and something that has to be taken into account. Now, why does liquid staking matter long term? Well, for blockchains, especially blockchains holding financial value or personal value or data value, because there's a value on data, even if it's not necessarily financial, there needs to be corresponding security that keeps the network honest and that helps avoid exploits and manipulation and so on. And in order to do that, as ecosystems scale, which we're hoping they continue to do, you need more and more economic security and more people validating for performance and adding, stake for security purposes to these validators and different things. And in order to facilitate that, we need to, again, appeal to people, especially, kind of the next middle of the bell curve entrance into the space, who are a lot more sophisticated. They're your traditional financial people that might do some self-directed trading, that are really going to do a lot more research and want to try to understand optionality and workflows. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but we have to provide the availability to do both. And so we see that as a very important part of scaling blockchains in particular. We take that pretty seriously.
Yeah.
It's exciting, but it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with flares, it's actually twice as important almost, because we don't just have validators that require Flare to operate to be able to validate the transactions, but in the future, Sceptre will also support FTSOs, and that's a core functionality of the network. So, and otherwise, that Flare would also be locked up as red flare, of course, but still, it needs to stay there, or those FTSOs don't have flare to do their job.
Absolutely. And I think to that point, that's maybe even, somewhat under a magnifying glass, the same relationship between the validator economic security oracles, whether they're, transferring data about assets on chain or off chain or whatever the case. I mean, that's the ultimate financial security for those types of operations. So it's very important. I think, as we continue to support both Flare and other ecosystems, I think there's some interesting opportunities for Flare and FTSO to expand even beyond Flare, which we're excited to support. But in order to do that, we need very solid tech, very vibrant communities, and we need to, make sure that we can prove that we're here for the long haul and we actually care.
Yeah,
we're going to do that.
I think you are probably someone who always has an idea of what is missing or what you would like to see next. What would you like to see next, or what do you think is missing on Flare at the moment that it needs the most?
I mean, Flare is a newly evolving ecosystem for all intents and purposes. They did a lot of novel things with FTSO and with other parts of the technology, I think, that we probably don't need to get into. But, it takes some time to build that and to get it tested properly. And I think, although sometimes we can all be a little bit impatient, if you really are going to build something that matters, taking the time to do it the right way is, of course, important. You're only one exploit away from being irrelevant. And I think Flare's done a very good job of measuring twice and cutting once. And so what's exciting now, with, Kinetic and Sceptre launching and a few other DeFi protocols, Spark and Blaze and others, Enosis, et cetera. Sorry if I missed anybody, but there's a lot of great projects. I can't list them all. But, now that we're starting to launch and the infrastructure is available and Stargate became available, so there's a venue to transfer assets to and from, et cetera. Now we're kind of at that really annoying point where we have to scale that initial liquidity throughout the ecosystem. And I say annoying because this exists in every ecosystem ever, short of the ecosystem themselves throwing tens of millions of dollars at it, which generally works for a very short period of time, but isn't always sticky. It takes some time. And so, you have to first build the workflows and build the interactions amongst dApps. And, a lot of these applications have to be here long enough to prove some value and to prove some security and some commitment to being here, which I think we're well on the way of doing across Flare. And I think, if I had to guess, we'd probably see some pretty interesting flows of capital here in the next few weeks. And that should really help to kickstart DeFi functionality. And so right now we're slowly kind of inching up the amount of borrowing and lending we can do on Kinetic. And we're slowly inching up the amount of people that are using sFLRE because, of course, you need secondary and tertiary use cases for these assets to really be powerful. We're getting pretty close to kind of that dam breaking slightly, where we're going to get a decent influx of assets, which will allow that flywheel to continue. So what's missing? I mean, I think the most obvious thing is capital, but capital generally comes as, the technology gets built out a little bit more, and we've had some time to convince our institutional partners, and Flare has had time to convince their institutional partners that we're ready. And so I think that's probably the one thing that's missing the most is capital. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things, but I also believe that the solutions are in progress. And this is a natural progression of a blockchain. We're never patient enough, myself included. I want everything to happen now.
Win.
Yeah, win. But I think we're doing a good job. And I think, everybody's got to walk before they run. And we're getting pretty close.
Yep, definitely. All right. Let's see if we have any questions from our users. They usually appear on screen. There they are.
There we go. Is Flare everything you expected to be as a network? That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to answer that, because is Flare now everything I expect it to be based on what I know the vision is? Not yet. I mean, we're not yet where the vision is leading us. So of course, I think there's lots of work to be done from our perspective, from Flare's perspective. What I do know, and has exceeded expectations, is the unwavering commitment and relationship and interaction with the Flare core team. Their focus on things that aren't super sexy to the average user, but security and reliability of the ecosystem, and working with us to overcome challenges that they can fix or that we can fix, has definitely exceeded expectations. I mean, I think if we were already at the point where we expected it to be, there's not much promise for the future. So it's, as a network, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but where I hang my hat, I think when it comes to Flare, is we are making progress in very good strides in the direction that I believe the space needs to go. The core team and other protocols building in the space are great people that are deeply committed to growing Flare. And so for those reasons, yeah, that's what I expect, I suppose, as we're pursuing the ultimate vision and opportunity that a new ecosystem provides. Good question.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also like that you start out on that journey, and then things happen, and then you have to change trajectory. So if it would be what you expected, then tomorrow it's something else that you need, right? So
we all have a healthy dose of unconscious incompetence when we start something new, and eventually you start becoming consciously incompetent, and you go, "Holy crap! There's a lot of things I got to figure out here pretty quick." And
yeah, that's a scary moment.
It's exciting to see, though, that not just us, but Flare and many others in the ecosystem are adapting and finding solutions, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Let's see.
Where do I see Flare Network 1 year from now? Well, hopefully still in the same place. In the same place as in Flare Network still exists, but I believe it will. I think there's quite a few things in the short term that are really promising with respect to catapulting Flare into common consciousness. I think the first one, of course, is F assets. F assets aren't the be all end all of Flare, but I think they really are a unique kind of evolution of cross chain DeFi and value accrual. F assets with, of course, XRP being the first, and I think BTC is the second. And I'm not sure if they've publicly announced the third and fourth yet, but it's really to unlock equity value and liquidity value in a lot of these ecosystems, which plays very directly into DeFi, into liquidity opportunities, which I think when, with some scale and with some volume, is going to come some really interesting and really sophisticated on-chain products. And so there's a lot of guys building in the background, guys and girls, some really interesting derivatives platforms and prediction market type stuff and really interesting things that will become orders of magnitude more exciting when we have decent liquidity, which F assets should bring. And so in a year from now, I think we'll have a pretty good representation of F assets. I think there's some other really interesting things on the roadmap that may surprise people a little bit from Flare in terms of how applicable they may be in the relative short term, within a year. But I think we're definitely gonna be on the way to scaling both liquidity and I think the sophistication of workflows that Flare will enable is definitely unique, and I'm excited about that. A little bit being a little bit cagey on that question because I don't want to spill steal any thunder or spill any beans that I'm not entitled to do so.
All right. Rome Blockchain Labs built Kinetic, but only manages Sceptre. Are you guys planning on building new protocols on Flare, even if you don't end up managing them?
Yeah, so Rome Blockchain is not a development vendor. So generally speaking, when we build and launch protocols, we do so with the intention of being a meaningful long-term participant in the protocol. Examples being Benki and Moonwell, and of course Kinetic and Sceptre and others. And so, no, I mean, if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I've got some money. Do you want to build this for us?" Unfortunately, the answer would be unequivocally no. Unfortunately, because that would be cool if you had some groups, but the reality is it's very, very, very expensive to do things the way that we do, and it would be next to impossible for people to afford to hire RBL to build something. And so for that reason, we have to be very conscious about what we build and where we build it, and be willing to invest our own money and our own time, often a lot more than we anticipated. But anyways, we have to have very high conviction, and with high conviction generally comes continued involvement, and vice versa. Continued involvement helps to build your conviction. And so will we build new protocols on Flare? Well, I alluded to some stuff that we're working on that isn't necessarily intended initially for Flare, but very likely could move to Flare for a host of reasons once Flare's technology evolves the way it will. Again, not going to get too deep into that, but there's some really interesting opportunity there. We will continue to evolve the lending markets. There's some novel tech that we'll probably add to the lending markets relatively soon that most people haven't seen from a lending perspective within the next, let's call it 6 months, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, we're definitely going to evolve on Flare. I think we'll support other projects and other developments in many ways, but not necessarily build them. But yeah, I mean, you can't ever...
You never know, right? What opportunity arises and where you think like, okay, that actually makes sense, because I've been in these discussions with you quite often, and there's so many possibilities.
We could do anything anywhere, really.
Grab them all, but it's like when they tell you have 1 minute to grab anything you can from the supermarket, and they don't even give you a freaking card. Well, that's what it's like, and you'll end up with a couple of broken pots at the register. And so making choices is probably the hardest thing that
I think
be done.
I think just to continue to build on this question, I think the venture space in blockchain is starting to shift, in my opinion, for the better, long term. But now the days of raising millions of dollars on some wacky idea with no proof of concept or traction are near over. So, the ability to just go and raise money to build something and spend exorbitant amounts of money on liquidity mining and all of these other things, those days are somewhat over, because venture is becoming a lot more sophisticated and has lost a lot of money on ideas that never materialize. So I think, going forward, you have to, again, be willing to invest a little bit more meaningfully in the products that you're developing. You have to get them to a certain level of scale, and in many cases, utilization before you can go out and raise meaningful money to continue to build, which I think is great long-term. But again, to your point, it makes us have to focus a lot more on where we have very high conviction, because it's not simple. Definitely not simple.
All right.
Short answer, yes.
You can expect it. Can't tell you yet what's next, but definitely I think we can add some to that, in the sense of The reason why Sceptre would like to be a multi-network liquid staking protocol is, of course, partially stability, because one network might go down a bit, another comes up, and so on. So of course that's a good thing for the sustainability, and it helps all the networks that we work on, right? I mean, as long as we have the ability to sit behind our desk and do our work for the protocol, that's good. But it also, and I think that's even more important, if we add another network, that brings in other people as well. It brings people into contact with Flare, with liquid staking on Flare, with all the other protocols on Flare. So yeah, definitely something that we are working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most exciting components of that is, in fact, the network effect, right? I mean, if you launch on another ecosystem that gets some traction and attention, and they see on Sceptre, oh, Flare, there's some pretty interesting liquid staking opportunity on Flare, it may be a network they haven't looked at before. And so, yeah, there's many reasons. Of course, all of the things we do are businesses. They need to earn money. They need to be sustainable. They need to be revenue positive. Like I said before, raising funds is not shooting fish in a barrel like it once was in crypto. And, we've seen that from both sides. And I think, yeah, you have to focus on operating these things, managing your P&L and realistically building in contingencies. So expanding beyond any single network, of course, is diversification, which arguably most businesses should look into.
All right.
On Go Fund Yourself. If I could have any guest, I mean, we have guests all the time on Go Fund Yourself. I think Hugo's a really interesting guy. I just had a call with him this morning, and he's really fun to talk to. I mean, Hugo talks a lot on Twitter and on different podcasts and spaces and different things. But yeah, I think he's a really interesting guy. Max from Flare is a really, really cool dude. I think he's been around the space for a while and deeply understands different ecosystems and developers and developer needs, and does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, coordinating and helping avoid conflict and problems. So those guys are pretty fun to have on. I think Ami, the head of marketing, would be great to have on, because there's just so many fun things to brainstorm with respect to creating kind of guerrilla marketing opportunities and virality and cross-network pollination and so on. And I think she would be a really good guest. So Go Fund Yourself, generally speaking, is a news podcast. So, we report on the news and how things are evolving in the space. And then we do something called FUD with Friends, which usually has some general topic, specific topic that for whatever reason is relevant. So it would also depend on kind of what the topic is and where our focus is that week. But yeah, totally open to it. There's a lot of other, again, protocols. We don't have enough time to list everybody, but there's a lot of other people, Steer, Spark, Enosis. Like, there's some great builders in the space, Blaze, and others that that all have unique understandings and knowledge to bring to the table. I wish I could have everybody on Go Fund Yourself, but someday.
Maybe one day. Yeah.
Someday.
All right. I think that's it for the questions. So do you have any, for lack of a better word, final words for the audience?
Well, I hope these aren't the final words. I do plan to,
today
come on here sometime again. I was on a call with Gabe earlier, and he said his shirt says, "This body will someday be a corpse." I just hope that someday for me is not after this podcast, but you never know. Final thoughts. Again, I think there is a lot of exciting stuff happening. It's frustrating when you're focused. If your focus is long-term in crypto, in blockchain, and you're not trying to turn $100 into $1 million by December, and your only focus is on, trying to do something that literally everybody will not be able to accomplish. There's a couple people, and most of them are lying. But if you're really focused on long-term, I think don't get lost in the noise. It's easy to get frustrated that the meme coins are sucking up all the oxygen right now. And some of these other ecosystems that you're like, what? I mean, in the long run, things that build meaningful value and meaningful iterations on technologies that exist currently, I think are where I like to focus my time, and that's where the value will eventually accrue to. And so Flare, from my perspective, is one of those ecosystems, not the only one, but one of those ecosystems that, isn't always the sexiest, from a narrative perspective and so on. But I appreciate it. And I think, if you're here for the right reasons and you really want to be a part of evolving technology in the future, a little bit of patience. I know it's hard, but have some patience. I think there's some really exciting stuff coming.
Cool.
There we go.
Thank you for coming to the show. And we'll definitely ask you again.
I mean, if you keep paying me as much as you do to come on here as a guest, I'll come anytime.
I will pay that to anyone.
All right, man. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Just a quick call out. Our friendly whale that JD is also familiar with on Telegram has been making some. Yeah, he's been making some videos about how to use certain protocols, and I think that's just awesome when someone puts that kind of effort into educating the community. So just a shout out. Thanks for that. I think that's really cool. Otherwise, besides that, that's it. Have a great day or a great morning, wherever you are. And see you next time.
Take care, guys.